To be or not to be is the question Shakespeare has imposed. The answer was, in fact, to be. To be a legacy is what Shakespeare is, a legacy that will outlive all of us as his play work is transcendental. Remediation and interpretations of his work have ensured this through films and plays like The King, which is an adaptation of his plays Henry IV and Henry V, Romeo and Juliet, and Cleopatra and Antony. While this is important for the modern era, one aspect that is often disregarded is the effect his work has had historically. History is an important aspect of Shakespeare's work. Most of these historical adaptations he creates revolve around the British monarchy, but he also wrote about Roman figures like Julius Caesar, Antony, and Cleopatra. Shakespeare's first play revolving British monarchs was most likely Henry VI, which he and Christopher Marlowe collaborated on in 1591. These historical plays were one of many that he created, which ranged from Edward II and III, Henry IV through Henry VIII, and King John. Shakespeare wrote all of these plays in a 25-year span. Moreover, his history plays shaped English national identity. Through his writing, he influenced national pride under Queen Elizabeth I's rule. His dramatization of the lives of English kings and national events helped the common folk feel connected to their country. Another outcome Shakespeare's history plays produce is a humanization of these otherworldly figures. Often these historical figures are viewed through a lens that can't be compared to or resemble the lives of the common folk. However, Shakespeare dismantled this by giving these characters emotions, flaws, personal struggles, and relationship issues. One example I can name is Shakespeare's interpretation of Henry V in his plays Henry IV and Henry V. Historically, Henry V is often viewed as one of the greatest, if not the greatest warrior kings in English history, despite only reigning for 9 years. He was a well-disciplined, politically involved teenager even before he became the king. He fought in wars as a young man and was a part of his father's royal council. However, Shakespeare portrays him as a drunk who avoids responsibility, which was far from the truth. A matter of fact, Prince Hal was the complete opposite. This also spins back to what I mentioned earlier. His plays had a political and social purpose. Had he kept all of these interpretations of British history canon, the message or goal Shakespeare intended to impose on his audience would have been minuscule. Making these monarchs seem human appeals to the common folk. By fabricating an extreme, undisciplined, and rebellious interpretation of Prince Hal's youth, he can then mold him into a great, proud king who fights for the everyday citizen. Shakespeare visualizes this piece of British history by creating an ideal king, which was crucial at the time due to the fact England was at war with Spain, thus causing a boost in patriotism. There were also a lot of events that were fabricated. For example, Henry Friend's Falstaff in the plays was not even a real person. The purpose of this character was for comedic purposes, as it was a trope to have on stage a drunk, naive. Also, his speech at Agincourt never happened. Yes, it was most likely true that Henry V did give some motivation to his troops, but there are no transcriptions and evidence of the speech ever occurring, which again, Shakespeare's purpose was to increase the morale of English citizens. Another fictional aspect was the scene of the tennis balls. There is no documentation of this ever happening in history, and for the play's purpose, it was put there to justify the act of war on France. Another historical play I want to mention is Julius Caesar. While it is based on Roman history, Shakespeare himself was influenced by another piece of work. He wrote this play based off of the Greek historian Plutarch's work, where Plutarch wrote a biography or multiple biographies off of Roman figures. The first inaccuracy I want to mention is the timeline. In the play, the events that occur span over a couple days. In the play, the events that occur span over a couple of days. In actuality, these ev- in his in actuality, these events unfolded in the span of 2 years. Another thing I want to mention is the location of Caesar's assassination. In the play, Caesar is assassinated at the Senate House, but this was not the case. He was actually assassinated in the theater of Pompeii. The last historical play I want to mention is Antony and Cleopatra. While it was historically accurate portraying the post-Caesar era, there were still inaccuracies for entertainment purposes. For example, the timeline again. It was condensed for dramatic purposes. He also fabricated the scenes like the barge speech, which was intended to solidify the allure and power behind Cleopatra's image. All in all, the purpose of this video is to highlight the usage of history in his plays. While their purpose was to entertain the audience, there were a lot of underlying political and social commentary Shakespeare was making. Through his plays, he was indirectly speaking about the Elizabethan monarchy. Not only were there a lot of issues that he wanted the common folk to know, but he was also speaking to those in power. He was giving warnings to the monarchy itself by implying that too much power creates tyranny and fear, which would then lead to rebellions, revolution, and death. This would eventually create a cycle of death. Anyways, thank you guys for watching the video. Feel free to subscribe and like, and I'll see you on the next one.